Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for coming. My name is Kim Larkin and I hail from Cheshire, Connecticut. So that's a little under 2 hours from here. And I've been an art teacher for a little over 20 years. And I teach children up through seniors, painting and sculpting and all types of art programs. And about 10 years ago, my sister and I decided to start a chocolate business, a commercial chocolate business. We really didn't know what we were doing, shocking. And we converted part of my home for a commercial space. And we bought the big machinery, and the thing I was most interested in was that little molds that are out there now. Many of them are laser cut and they have beautiful detail. So once you mold it and then you dust it with a metallic edible dust, it really looks like a work of fine art. So I do a lot of Celtic programs, being Irish, and I just thought I brought some to show you. There's some pictures over there, but they're really beautiful. The claddagh molds, the knots, they're just very beautiful. So that's really why I started it. And then my first cold call that I made was to the Omni New Haven Hotel. And I called them because I came upon this mold that looked like the Yale Bulldog. And I didn't know what I was doing, so I'm like, hi, I have Yale Bulldogs chocolates. Would you be interested? And she's like, sure, come on down. So that was 10 years ago, and I'm still making the chocolate bulldogs for the Yale Parents Weekend and the graduation. So my bulldogs have been all over the country, shipped to California and whatnot. So it's been an adventure. And now I do a lot of work with commercial hotels and things like that. And I worked at my library and I started doing programming there. And that's how I got into doing programming with chocolate and foods and teas and even creative programming like aromatherapy programs as well, all my passions. So I'm really having a lot of fun, and I've been in Massachusetts quite a bit this past year. So I want to share a little bit of everything with you. I'm going to give you a little bit of the background of chocolate because I think it's interesting. And a little bit of how it sort of went around the world and how it's made. And then we'll talk a little bit about tablescaping. And we're going to sample, of course, the chocolates that I made. So first we're going to start with something that is on the lower percentage of cacao. So we have 54% cacao. So that's the cocoa that's present in the chocolate. So I make a bark in the commercial kitchen that I have, and the bark has a lot of nice textures in it, which I really like. I hope you'll enjoy it. It has natural coconut and pumpkin seed and a little Himalayan sea salt for contrast for the sweet and salt. And then there are some pomegranate infused cranberries, so it's a little bit of a berry flavor. Since we're going to be having two types of drinks tonight that have berry backgrounds to them, and one is a apple harvest sangria that has some ginger and apple, so that's a neutral drink that we'll start with first. That's made with Honeycrisp apples and some ginger beer, which is really neat. That has a nice kick to it. And it has also spices in it, so you'll see what you think of that. Now with that, if you want it, that's a mocktail, so there's no alcohol present in that. But if you really love apple flavor, you could add some red wine to it, a bottle of red wine for your guests, or you can add some Calvados. So the apple brandy is delicious with that. So those are two twists on that, and we'll try that in a second. And then the last one we have for a drink is a mocktail as well, and it's a pomegranate spritzer. So that's really nice because it's very nice and light. It's very healthful actually in the winter, and it has some orange juice in it, some natural pomegranate juice, wonderful juice, which is great. And then you add a little bit of flavored seltzer to it. So that gives it the spritz. And of course, again, if you want to make it a mocktail, an alcoholic drink, you then would add a nice white wine to it. So that's really nice. I've added Prosecco to that as well. So that gives it a nice little sweet flavor and some fizz. So those are two that we're having. So we'll start with our bark, which is, like I was saying, 54% cacao. So with chocolate, if you have something that's 54%, the remainder of that percentage that equals 100%, which is 46%, is the sugar content. So that's how you can tell. Milk chocolate. Who loves milk chocolate? There, you said it, you were brave. You just raised your hand. That's right. Well, that is milk chocolate. It usually runs about 33% cacao. So 33%, so it's 2/3 sugar. 2/3 sugar with that. And then somebody was mentioning that they like white chocolate. Who likes white chocolate? Anybody? You do, you do. So white chocolate has no cacao present. So that's sugar and cocoa butter. So that's why you like it. It's very smooth, right? Smooth and sweet, right? So after we have the bark, we are going to try a vitamin of sorts, our 86% dark chocolate. So that's a bittersweet chocolate, and studies tell us that chocolate, 70% and up, is supposed to be very healthful now. 70% has, a good amount of cacao in it, which is extremely healthful. We'll talk about in a sec. And of course, 86% is only 14% sugar. So that is very, very bittersweet. But I never used to like bittersweet chocolate, but I've done a lot of research. You see my research here, right here? All for you, all for you. I'm very dedicated. So I never used to like it, but then I started pairing it with red wines. And the natural sugar that's present in the red wine really pairs nicely with a bittersweet chocolate. So if you're pairing it and you let the chocolate melt on your tongue a little bit, then put your tongue to the roof of your mouth so your palate gets covered with it, and then you drink the wine and sip the wine. It pairs wonderfully. It's a great experiment. You should grab some friends and experiment. It's excellent. So we'll have that at the end. And I always like to tell this story that at one of my programs, it was at a Celtic program, there was a woman, I think she was about 95, she was Irish, and I always ask people, do you like, 86% cacao, anything stronger than that? And so she raised her hand, she's like, I love 90%. I have that every day, a nice chunk in the morning, and so I was like, wow, she looks great, She had a lot of energy. And I said, oh, do you have that with your Bewley's tea, that nice black tea in the morning with some honey or sugar? And she's like, no, I just wash that chocolate down with a little shot of Jameson every morning. And I'm good to go for the day. And I'm thinking, there is the power of positive thinking, right? She knows it gives her the energy for the day, and she looked great. So, and who wouldn't want to get up when that's waiting for you for your breakfast, right? So that will be the chocolate pairings that we have and our beverage pairings. And then we have, the last one will be our, actually we'll use this in the middle, I think. This is our apricot, dried apricot dipped in 72% cacao. So that's mid-range, and these are tempered chocolates. So I temper them in the machine, which means it's a shelf-stable product, which means under the right temperature conditions, just like you would buy a Lindt truffle at the store. When you bite it and you have that little snap, this will remain that way also, as long as it's at the right temperature and it doesn't go out of temper, out of heat. And so this is a really nice mid-range, and this is very sweet. So this will lead us to our pomegranate spritzer. So we're going to try, before we begin, I'll get you something to drink. Okay, we're going to try our first mocktail. And like I said, it has the nice Honeycrisp apples in it. That sits about 4 to 6 hours in the fridge. So you can make that ahead of time and let it steep. And I even put some clove in and let it steep as well. So that way everything melds together and everything sort of comes together in a nice flavor. So we'll get that to you. Okay, so there are little chunks of apple in there, so be careful when you drink. Yeah, there's nothing in there. It's just ginger beer, which is not alcoholic. Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yep. There's no alcohol in here. Yep. So while you're enjoying that, let me tell you a little bit about the history of chocolate. Okay, so this is a botanical drawing from a Spanish explorer who was dealing with the Aztecs, and they learned about the benefits of chocolate from the Aztecs, from Montezuma. The Olmec Indians started the cacao plantations, and then they shared it with the Aztecs, and the Aztecs were the ones to know that it was very healthful, full of antioxidants. Of course, they didn't know that's what it was, but they would drink 50 cups of this bitter liquid called cacahuate. And so that is the crushed nibs of cacao, which is a roasted bean, infused in hot water, steeped in hot water. So that kept their fatigue away, provided energy. The warriors used to take the nibs on, their hunting journeys, and it kept disease away as well. So that's why they drank it. This is what the pod looks like when it's split in half. So here we go. Here's the pod hanging on the tree, and you can see an actual picture of this. These big pods, they're called kibasas. And the kibasas are like football size. This is about the size, split in half, okay? And so these are all grown in the tropical rainforest, so most of this is harvested by hand with machete for all the chocolate that is grown around the world, which is pretty amazing. It's, a billion-dollar industry around the world. So in order for that to be harvested, they then have to split these pods in half, and they came up with a very smart idea of putting sieves out in, like screening, out in the rainforest, and they would turn these over. Now the only difference is when you looked at this pod, it would have lemony citrus pulp in here. And so when they turned it over, the pulp biodegrades in the heat, they let it sit, it biodegrades, and then they're able to harvest these beans, which are the gold of the pod. And so in one pod, you can get like 45 to 60 beans in here. And you need 10 of these pods to equal 1 pound of processed chocolate. So that's amazing. When I bring my little tempering machine for programs, a pound is nothing. So that is a lot of effort for 1 pound of processed chocolate. So after they break the pods open and turn them over, then they ferment them. So then now they have to spread the beans out, they cover them with banana leaves, and now the fermentation takes place. And so in order for the beans to become a little more, the sugars develop inside the beans a little bit. So that's what they do. And they used to actually turn these beans over by their feet at one time. Imagine that, before they had these processes in place. And after they dry the beans and they have determined that they're ready to go, they can clean and roast them. So they winnow them, they take away all the silk and whatnot. So this is a huge process. Then they roast the beans. And after they roast them, then they crushed the nibs, they grind the nibs. So nibs are just beans that are roasted and broken into pieces. That's what a nib is. So now you can find nibs in the grocery store. Who has had nibs? Cacao nibs. Okay, so how have you had them? A Girl Scout event. Chocolate tasting, okay. As is. Do you eat them or put them on your cereal or? Yeah. A lot of people, it's funny, when people try it, it smells beautiful because it has beautiful cacao and cocoa present. The aroma is beautiful, but then of course when you taste it, it's like when you used to sneak your mother's baker's chocolate. It's a bad surprise. There's no sugar present, right? But you get used to it, and they're very healthful. It's considered one of the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. David Wolf, who is a nutritionist from California, he wrote a whole book about the nutrition and the multiple benefits of cacao, adding cacao to your diet, being rich in antioxidants and minerals. So a lot of people have started incorporating it into their diet as well. And both my daughters live in California. So of course, when you go to California, there are nibs everywhere. Nibs on everything. In the smoothies, on the steaks, it's everywhere. So if you don't eat all your nibs, what happens? They press the liqueur and they get the cocoa butter out and they crush it and press it so you have this paste that chocolate, is used in the process. And there's also alkalization that the Dutch sort of figured out by adding alkaline salts, the Dutch processed cocoa, to create cocoa powder. So that's an amazing journey that, a pod has to go through in order to make, just 1 pound of chocolate. It's pretty amazing. So, and this is what the Latin term for it is, Theobroma cacao, food of the gods. That actually means drink of the gods, broma for drink. But that's a picture of the roasted beans. Now, I had a woman in my program from Jamaica a few weeks ago, and she said they actually have a lot of cocoa trees cacao trees out on their backyards, and they go and take the pods, they split them open, and they don't even roast them by heat. They put them out in the heat of the sun on pans and roast them like that. And then they just crush them themselves with mortar and pestle and eat it that way. And they also eat the pulp inside the pod. She said it's delicious and a lot of children eat it. Even though before that, I only read that the monkeys in the rainforest eat the pulp. They like it. They sort of gnaw holes in the pod and suck the pulp out. And there's a children's book called No Monkeys, No Chocolate. And it's true, that's what they do. They rip these pods off the tree, they gnaw the hole, they suck the pulp out. But when they suck the pulp out, they like the pulp, but they also are sucking out the very, very bitter beans. So what happens? They spit the beans out onto the rainforest floor. So that's how things continue to grow, which I thought was pretty amazing. But I guess in Jamaica, they eat the pulp as a nutritive thing because it's high in vitamin C. And they also drink the cacahuate, the bitter liquid that the Aztecs drank. They also crush the beans and drink it in hot water. She said they call it cocoa tea. So it probably keeps a lot of disease away and keeps you very healthful. So that's a little bit about that. Okay, so let's start with some chocolate. We will start with our bark. Okay, does anybody have any nut allergies? Anyone? Okay, because there are no nuts in this bark, but I do have nuts in the workshop, so we want to make sure about that. Okay, so we're going to pass this around, and since you have a little bit of sweet on your palate with the apple and the ginger, we've got these textures in here. Pumpkin seed, like I said, natural pumpkin seed, not roasted, so it's got the natural fats in there. Natural coconut, which is nice and has natural fats, and the sweet from the cranberry. So I'm going to give you this, and you can take one and pass it along back there, and I'll pass this out. See what you think about this. So this is 54%. It's a Belgian chocolate. You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh, nice big aisles I can walk through.
Thank
Here you go.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Mm-hmm.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. So you can let it melt on your tongue a little bit, and it's tempered, so it should melt at your body temp. That's very nice. And then you should be able to taste the salt and the sweet. Who likes plain chocolate versus textured? I like textured. You like just plain. So what's your percentage that you like?
I usually go 75 or 80.
75 or 80. You know what I saw the other day? I don't know if you've seen it. It's amazing. In the chocolate aisle, 100% cacao. That's new.
Yeah, I've had that.
Isn't that amazing? So that is Baker's chocolate. That's what it is. Total cacao without sugar. That's amazing. I never thought I'd see that. First you saw 90, 92, and then 100. So that's pretty amazing. So let me just tell you while you're snacking on that, I think this is interesting too. So after the Aztecs shared the recipe with the Spanish about the cacahuate and the chocolate, this went over to Spain, and the Spanish monks actually sort of changed the flavor of the cacahuate a little bit by adding some little natural honeys and things like that, so it was palatable. And then it made its way around Europe and came over here. But in the 1700s, mid-1700s, there was a man, John Hannon, an Irishman, and he landed in Dorchester, Massachusetts, and he knew how to make chocolate. The chocolate that was made back then was sort of like in a cake form, so it was a little bit harder, and they would scrape it into your hot liquid to make like a drinking chocolate. But he had that knowledge, and he came over to Dorchester, Massachusetts, and here is a postcard of the mill that he started, which is pretty amazing in Dorchester. It's not there anymore, but it's huge. And this was a mill that was started with Dr. James Baker. He met Dr. Baker. And Dr. Baker wanted to be on the forefront of beginning a chocolate mill in North America. So they combined forces. He provided the funds, and John Hannon provided the know-how. And so they did very, very well. He would go over to the West Indies to purvey the beans, and they continued for many, many years. So it's pretty amazing how Providence happens like that. And then after the Irishman, John Hannon, in the 1800s, the English started making the chocolate bars in San Francisco, Ghirardelli. They were going over to Peru to get beans, and they came back when the gold rush was happening. And so they were actually trading beans and chocolate and tools for gold nuggets with the gold miners, which is pretty amazing. And Cadbury came on the scene, John Cadbury. He actually made his millions. You probably know about him with his biscuits and whatnot from England. And Cadbury chocolates as well, but he made his millions with establishing drinking chocolates, which now have come back in vogue. So melting chocolates and adding milk and whatnot. So he made his millions like that. The Italians started adding gianduja, which is like Nutella or hazelnut paste, to give their twist on it. Daniel Peter was a Swiss chemist, and he was helping this man, Henri Nestle, try and come up with condensed milk to make milk chocolate. And Rudolf Lindt, of Lindt fame, he started making the conching machine. He created the conching machine, which made the paddles of the machine look like conch shells. So they blended the chocolate until it was ultra smooth, which was a big thing, but because before it was gritty. So that was an amazing discovery. And of course, Lindt is still around. Lindt just purchased, in 2014, they just purchased Whitman's and Russell Stover's, that pedestrian chocolate. So Russell Stover's and Whitman's has been around since the 1840s as well. And they were one of the leaders in pharmacies. They were, we're in 19,000 pharmacies. And then after that, Joseph Draps, in the early 1900s, he started the Godiva Company, which is still around. And then Nestle as well. And I just found out that someone told me, not Nestle, excuse me, Milton Hershey, he was supposed to be on the Titanic. Someone told me that. He had booked passage on the Titanic, but thank goodness his passage got changed. And he also suggested to the Army that they should have chocolate bars in the ration kits. So they're still there present today in the D-ration kit, which is amazing. So what did you think of that bark?
Delicious.
Do you like the bark? I hope you did. I really, really enjoy that. I really like that a lot. Okay, so I think we'll try, our next one will be our mid-range, which is our 73% tempered. It's sort of like a semi-sweet. It has nice vanilla notes to it, and it has a nice caramel smell too. So everybody's palate is different, so you'll see what you think of that and see what notes, just like when you drink a wine, what notes you can pick up on that. Okay, so this is our tempered chocolate with our dried apricot. So this is nice because it's a very concentrated sugar in the apricot. And the chocolate is very nice as well because it's not as cloyingly sweet as the apricot. Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Make sure
You're
the
welcome.
cameraman gets one.
I know, you have to keep everybody happy. You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. What do you think?
That got too good.
Yeah? I like anything with concentrated fruit. Now this would go really nicely with the pomegranate spritzer we're going to have. We'll have that at the end. So that'll be sort of like a clean flavor. Even though it's berry, it's very clean with the seltzer and the acid from the orange juice. So that'll be a nice pairing as well. Okay, so who is interested in tablescaping? Who has done that before? Laying out, you have? Yes? Raise your hand. Raise your hand. Is it true? Yeah? Well, I mean, we're going to talk about the elements of tablescaping, but even though I love to do this because with art I love texture, even in my bark, as you well know. Texture, color, and lots of vibrant contrast, I think, is a key to a fun table. But of course, we're not trying to aim to be perfectionists. That's all gone. I learned after 30 years of that. No, it's all gone. But this is what I like to do for color. So I just like to give a few hints about how to lay out a table, the few elements of design. So the first one would be basically peaks and valleys. You want to have height in the background so that you have interest. You don't want it to be one flat surface. That's boring. But if you like that, then it isn't boring. So this is nice because I love a lot of metals. They're very reflective of light as well. So copper, represents the warmth of the hearth. Silver, of course, represents like winter, the moon. Gold, when you incorporate gold, it represents the bounty and again, warmth and the reflective nature of the metal. So that's really nice to add a little bit of sparkle here and there. And even when I teach my art programs, I add a lot of glitter. So I'm a glitter girl. Lots of metal. So you want to establish height in the back, okay? And peaks and valleys, so you want to have different heights of things so that your eye can flow, which is nice. And then also texture of design and fabric. So we have nice silks here, and then we have different fabrics and nice textures of the jute here, the copper, the velvet. So things, I'm a big person. I can't keep my hands to myself even when I'm in a museum. I want to touch everything. I've had many security guards yell at me. Back away from this or that. So I was actually in the museum in London with my daughter. I was visiting her when she was abroad, and I was like the kid and she was the parent. She's like, "Don't do it, Mom. Don't do it. Don't embarrass me." I'm like, "That looks real." I just distract that security guard just for a minute. So anyway, like we were saying, peaks and valleys in the back, and also textures, contrast of textures of metal and glass. So even though we have copper here in different colors, we have glass, we have copper metal, and we have copper in the fabric as well. And I love to add different natural textures. So you have glass, you have pottery, there's even cork here. So that's a lot of fun. And layering is a big thing with design. So I love color and plates and things like that. So to pick out different plates, like these 3 plates are nice squares, but they're on an angle and they're layered with different colors and patterns. That's great. I also like to put in some natural elements. So I would always have something natural, like a bouquet of flowers, to bring in nature. And these are great. Like you can get these at the florist. These are preserved lemon leaves and magnolia leaves. So those are great. They're non-toxic, but they bring a lot of nature into the design. These are even actually real skeleton leaves that have color to them. So that's pretty neat. And of course, as you can see, they're sparkly. So that's on my list. So that's a little bit about peaks and valleys. Then you want to add elements of design with triangular design. So something at the top and a wider base. Triangles are big in design. It helps your eye flow. Groups of 3 or 5 or 7, odd number of groups. So I try and put like the different fruits in pairs as well. And a good idea is to anchor the ends of your table. Okay, so to give it weight and to anchor so that you can have flow that way as well. So I think that is a really nice application of design too. And I always like to put something funny. And when I put I don't really have dinner parties anymore. I just do buffet. I really think wine, bread, and cheese. That's my idea. And chocolate. Now that my children are gone, I don't cook for anybody. That's it. A carbohydrate, chocolate, and cheese. That's good. It's healthy. And that's it. And that's what we do when we put out our little party. And of course, you have to have, for those who do enjoy wine, that would be me. As again, back to my research. We have different types. So I'll have non-alcoholic things for people who don't want to imbibe and who are driving. But I also like to put out interesting things that I've discovered. And I do wine and chocolate programs as well, so I come upon a lot of very interesting things. So I like to always mention this, which is a very interesting selection for those who may like a red vermouth. So this is something called Antica Formula. Has anyone ever had that? So this is a beautiful gift for someone, and it's very, very rich. This was sort of, the recipe was discovered in this 1786 in Turin, Italy. And it's owned by the same family, the Carpano family. So they keep that recipe under lock and key. And it's fabulous. It's almost, I'm not really like a vermouth lover per se, but this is made with spices and dried fruits, but it really has the taste, the most present flavor is that of like orange rind. So it's very delicious with like sharp Parmigiano Reggiano. Again, one of my 3 food groups there, cheese and wine or vermouth. It is fabulous. So if you've never tried this before, I would highly recommend it. It's something very special, and it comes in a really cool decorative tin as well. But this is really a great little addition to a table. Then I brought these 2 selections that I just recently sampled at one of the wine programs. This is called Truffle Hunter. It's an Italian Barbera. And I love to get wines that have a story. So my friends are as quirky as I am. So I'll type up the story and have this little story on a podium behind the wine so they can read it as they're drinking. But this is pretty neat, I just want to tell you. This person, the company that made the wine, Bazio Winery, he wrote, I have 4 passions in my life: my family, my dog Lita, wine, and truffle hunting. And so this wine is named for his dog, Lita, the truffle hunter. And so this is a very nice dry Barbera. So this would pair very nicely with our dark chocolate if you were at the wine program, which you're not. I'm very sorry about that. But so this is awesome. I've paired this with 90% at programs, and with a very sharp cheese, this would be great. Now some cheesemongers will say, you know, when you look at cheese pairings, they'll say pair a gorgonzola or a blue with a dry red. But actually, I've read quite a few cheese experts say that you really don't want to do that because of the mold present, the natural mold in a blue or gorgonzola. It's metallic taste. Have you noticed that as well? It's weird. It's a chemical reaction, and it's not pleasant. So, and this other one is really a great one. This is a Riesling, a spate-lace Riesling from Bernkasseler Doctor. And you like Riesling? Yeah. This is a general rule of thumb. If you don't want to spend a lot of money at a nice wine tasting, let's say you just want to have one or two selections, the rule of thumb is a Riesling. Because you can get a dry Riesling. It doesn't have to be cloyingly sweet. I love Riesling, and this is delicious. So they even say that with a cheese pairing, that will pair with many cheeses because it won't overpower. It has a little bit of acidity, but it has a nice apricot floral flavor. Again, this is an interesting label. And a spate-lace Riesling, they let that sit a little bit longer, like 7 days longer, so it sort of, the sugars develop a little bit more. It's peppery and it has that stone fruit flavor. But this was a little of the history. I was like, why? Who named this Bernkasseler Doctor? What does that mean? Of course, it's a German wine. So this said, they have in this area of the Mosel Valley in Germany, they have 8 acres where the VLV, the old vines, are over 100 years old, which is amazing. So they're very rich vines. And they have high minerality in the soil. But the interesting part is that in the 13th century, an archbishop from the area of the Mosel Valley was said to be on death's door as he was passing through where this wine, the Spate-lace, was being developed. And they gave him a big goblet, probably one like mine, this big. See, that can't be more than 5 ounces, right? So they gave him the goblet of Spate-lace, and he recovered and was cured. And therefore, from that day forward, guess what they named the area? Bernkasseler Doctor, because the wine was the doctor that cured him. How about that? I thought that was funny. And it's still around today. So for a neutral wine, that's great. The Riesling is great. The Barbera is great as well for a red. And also with the mid-range chocolates that we've had, even sparkling Spanish cavas are nice. Any sparkling rosés are excellent with a mid-range chocolate. So that's nice if you just want to buy one wine. But really, who wants to buy just one wine? Maybe you do, but I have more than one. So these are the selections here. Okay, so now are you ready? Do you think you are man and woman enough for the vitamin? The 86%. Yes? All right. These poor children. You going to try it? They'll be up tonight, right? Oh, I want to make sure I told you this. This I thought was funny too. Before we go on with that, I forgot to mention the greens are considered, of course, nature. And they said greens and reds represent the Holly King. That was European lore that the Holly King reigned throughout the winter into the spring. So incorporating that sort of gives homage to that. Okay, so before we begin with the dark, for a fun wine tasting, just if you're having fun with friends, you can get for a vertical wine tasting, and vertical is a few different vintages from the same wine producer. So find a wine producer that you like and get some different vintages, and then you can compare and contrast. And you can even have fun and have rating cards, so that's great. As the night goes on, you may or may not be able to read them, but you know. And then horizontal tastings, that is gathering the same vintage from a few different wines that are sampling, but from different producers. So pick a year that you like. I think all years are good. But pick a year that you think has a particular great vintage, and then you can combine them from the different producers. And then the blind tasting is too many vertical and horizontal wine tastings, correct? Right. And blind tastings, you can actually cover the label as it says. and have people guess as to what you're tasting. Okay, here comes our dark. So 86% bittersweet and only 14% sugar. You look afraid. Are you afraid? No? All right, you're a brave girl. All right, here we go. Okay, so you might want to break a little piece so they don't stay up all night there. Okay, there you go. So this is a German chocolate.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
And you can tell when you taste it, even though it's a dark chocolate, it snaps, it's sort of stiff. It doesn't melt as fast as the tempered does. Let's get your big one. There you go. You're welcome. Oh, I love it myself. That's my favorite. Thank you. Do you want a piece? You got one? All right. So a lot of people say that with this dark chocolate, shavings of the Parmigiano Reggiano are very nice. Manchego is supposed to be eaten sort of with a mid-range chocolate, but I think it's nice enough and has enough weight to pair with this. I've done research with that too, with Manchego, and also anything smoked. So a smoked aged cheese has heft because it's got that little bit of texture from the smoke. So even a smoked Gouda is really nice with the darker chocolate. That goes really nice together. Oh, and we were talking about this red wine. So as far as decanting, some red wines take a longer time, and they need decanting. They need some of the oxygen to reach the wine when it wouldn't normally reach it with just the cork pulled. So sometimes you can get a really nice decanter and decant the red wine so that the aroma really develops. And that usually is mostly with reds. Okay, another suggestion, who loves the Moscow Mule? Has anyone had it? Yes, do you like it? Too strong? Too strong. Okay, so the Moscow Mule, it reminds me of, what's that drink in Hawaii that has all the liquor in it? Oh, I'm blanking out. Well, anyway, what is that? Mai Tai, right. The first time I had a Mai Tai, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of liquor in that. I think this is a nice flavor. The Moscow Mule has Grand Marnier or triple sec, so it has that nice orange flavor. And it's got a very small amount of vodka in it. So this is like a little over 1 ounce, so it's not much more than that. It's like 2 ounces of that. And it has a nice flavor because it has both lemon with a citrus Moscow Mule, lemon, like a half of a lemon, and then limes, fresh limes. So you have lemon and lime, then you have the sweet of the triple sec and the vodka, and that really is nice. And then you can garnish it with mint. This is really nice because if you use the copper mugs, now they're everywhere. You've probably seen them everywhere. It's a resurgence of this drink has come since the mixology has come about. But the reason that the copper mugs are used with this is because you can chill them and it can hold the cold. And the history of the Moscow Mule is pretty neat. In the 1940s, this Russian woman emigrated to the United States, and she actually came over here with 2,000 of these copper mugs. Her parents had a copper mug factory. I am not making this up. And she was the one that made the design of the hammered copper. Her name was Sophie, and she came over here schlepping these mugs. The father's like, don't come back if you don't sell them, right? So she's trying to sell her wares. She can't unload these mugs. And then there's this man, John Martin, and John Martin. He, at the same time, is working for Uline, but he buys the rights to the Smirnoff vodka company, which the sales are struggling. So he has the rights for vodka. She's walking around California, Hollywood, trying to sell her mugs. And then there's another man, Jack Morgan. He owns the very famous pub in Hollywood called the Cock and Bull. And he is sort of a mixologist of sorts, and he is brewing ginger beer in the back room. this really spicy ginger beer with natural ginger, and he cannot get anybody to try it. So he has tons of ginger beer that he can unload. She can't unload her mugs. And the guy from Ublind cannot get anybody to buy vodka. Who would not buy Smirnoffs? But at the time, nobody was into that. So here they come together in the Cock and Bull. Providence would have it. And they come together, and she tells her story, and they're like, well, let's join forces. Can you believe that? And so they sit for hours trying to develop a drink that would use the mugs, the vodka, and the ginger beer, and they came up with the Moscow Mule. And that was like the drink for the next 20 years. It was like the rage. And of course, she did very well with her copper mugs. Isn't that I love when I read stories like that. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. So she didn't have to go crawling back to Russia with the copper mugs. And Smirnoffs, you know, the rest is history there. So I thought that was pretty cool. So anyway, this is a great drink to serve with guests because it's not high in alcohol, but it has a nice, clean flavor with a little bit of a kick, right? A mule, the kick from the ginger beer, and a little bit of the vodka. So that's one of the drinks I would recommend. Okay, so I want to make sure I told you everything. Oh, as far as where cacao comes from, the Ivory Coast produces the most of it. And of course, you probably read Ecuador, Brazil, and even Mexico. And there is actually a plantation in Honolulu on the Dole Plantation. They're working with that and experimenting with that. So it's all around the world, but the Ivory Coast produces most of it. And as far as consumption, you would think we would consume the most, but we do not, which is shocking. The Austrians and the Swiss, they consume the most, 22%. Irish, they love their milk chocolate in Ireland, the grass-fed cows, showcasing their great creamy milk. So they eat a lot of the milk chocolate, and they consume a lot. And then there comes us. I don't know if I believe that, at 12 pounds per year. A mere 12 pounds a year. I don't know about that. But that is what they say. So the consumption, of course, is growing each year as chocolate is being used in everything, and especially in the drinking chocolates. Now that's a big rage, to have melted chocolate with cream. I know, what's bad about that, right? So, all right. So to tell you a little, actually I think I'll ask you some questions first. So who has done a cheese board, a basic cheese board? Have you done that before? So here is a marble, and many times some people say to chill it, but you don't have to chill it. You want to take your cheese out 1 to 2 hours before, believe it or not. So just like a wine, a red wine, the flavors can come to room temperature and really develop. So the rule of thumb is you just pick 3 cheeses. Some people say 5. I think that's overwhelming. So you want to choose something that is a very soft cheese, like a camembert or a brie, which is very similar, where the rind ripens from the inside out. And that's very nice, of course, because that is so neutral that pairs with fruit. I'm sure you've had it before, apricot preserves, apples. So that is a very nice beginning, and that doesn't overwhelm your palate. And then you can move to a semi-firm cheese, which I like Gouda, or a Manchego is really nice too. That has a little bit of salt. And I even just picked up this cheese that is an Austrian cheese, Chorherren cheese. That's what it's called, Chorherren. And that was similar to Anne Havarti cheese. So it had that little bit of a saltiness to it. So that was very nice. And then you want to choose something that's a harder cheese. I don't particularly like to put out Parmigiano Reggiano. It's too overwhelming. So I'll put out a very well-developed aged cheddar. Like a really well-aged Irish cheddar is beautiful. You like that, right? The reason for that is anything that is aged, especially 12 months or more, the fat actually develops in an aged cheese. So the moisture wicks away as the cheese ages, and so you have more fat presence on your tongue when you taste it, even though the cheddar might be crumbly. It's just very rich and delicious. And the cheddar goes really nicely with the apricots. dipped in chocolate. Even a darker chocolate is awesome with an aged cheddar. So that's good. Also, you might want to add, like for interest, different shapes if you're really down to the nitty gritty, if you care. So you can do a wheel of brie or camembert, and then you could do a log of chev, which is really nice, and that has nice grassy notes, the goat cheese. And then you can do a wedge of something, like a wedge of manchego or something. So that's nice to mix that up. And then you can do different milk sources. So maybe a sheep's milk cheese, which is very rich, cow's milk's in the middle, and a chev, which is sort of that has that chalky, grassy note, which is nice. So I think 3 is enough. And then that way it doesn't, really sort of compete with whatever else you're serving. And again, you don't have to cook a dinner, just take it from me, right? How much can you eat, right? I come from an Italian family where the food just never ends, course after course. But I've pared it down, I've learned my lesson. Just a little bit of cheese, some fruit, and maybe a little tiny bit of protein, and you're all set, and wine, right? What's better than that? So that's a cheese board. You can also incorporate some charcuterie in that, some of the dried salamis, the calabrese salami, which provides the fat on your tongue and has a little bit of heaviness and oiliness from the salamis. And you can add the cornichons, which are the little mini gherkins for acidity, which is really, that's like a staple, the cornichons. They're very nice, and they have that acid note, but they're also super crunchy, which is nice. So you have like crunch, and then you have the creaminess of your cheese. And then you can also add like a roasted flavored nut. So the oils will be developed in the nut. A lot of people like Marcona almonds as well. If you've ever had those before, those are delicious, and I can't stop eating those. So, and so you'll have your nuts, you'll have your charcuterie, your meats. And actually years ago, I think it was like in the 15th century, I thought this was neat, the charcuterie, they developed a guild of charcutiers, people that knew all about cooked pork meats to serve on these platters with cheeses. So, so you have a different variety, some meats, some cheeses, some cornichon, and of course your chocolates. You've got to have your chocolate. That's not on a normal cheese board, but it's on mine. So that's a little bit about cheese boards as well. Okay, so let me ask you some quick questions, see if you know. Okay, here are a few trivia questions. Okay, so this is wine trivia, okay? What do you think tannins are? Do you think they're tanning beds? Do you think they're the properties that give a wine its color? Or do you think it's how astringent the wine is after it comes in contact with grape skins? What do you think? C? Yell it out. Be confident. Always go with C, right, if you're not sure. All right, that is correct. C. That's right. Okay, what is a wine's nose? Is it the cork top? Is it referring to the wine's contents on its label, or is it the aroma of the wine? C again. I got to mix these up. That's right, C. You swirl your wine in the glass before you taste it. 2, 1, prove you have excellent wrist dexterity. I like that one. Impress your friends and your judgmental peers, or introduce oxygen to open up the wine's aroma. What do you think? C. Oh, C. That's right. Okay. Last bonus question. How many calories are in a 6-ounce glass of red wine? 100, 150, or C? Who cares? That's right, it's C again. Very good. Very good. Everybody gets that one. Everybody does. Okay, when we leave today, before I forget, we're going to have our pomegranate on the way out. And I have recipe sheets for you here. We have 2, let me read these for you. So 2 recipe sheets over there, actually 3. One will be the Moscow Mule recipe the non-alcoholic apple sangria, and the non-alcoholic pomegranate spritzer as well, okay? And if you have any questions, I included my email here, so you just email me and I'll answer any questions, whoopsie daisy, on that, okay? So then the other recipes are simple butternut squash. So if you do want to add anything to your buffet that is super simple and it sticks to your ribs and it's healthy, it's not full of fat. I came upon this years ago. It's just made with frozen squash puree. I can't speak. Frozen squash puree. And chicken broth and spices. That's it. You are welcome. And you can tell people, bless you, you were working on it all day. But it's delicious and it's healthy and it's super quick. So you'll really enjoy that. And also, if you're going to be serving your cheeses and you want to pare down, don't want to do any soup or anything, you can make this quick apricot walnut bread. And it's very simple. And walnut breads usually are served with cheese boards because they're neutral, but the walnut has a little bit of oil in it. So it's a super simple recipe. So I hope you enjoy that. And there's also one for poached fruit and wine. So you can take a cheap bottle or, inexpensive, cheap, what a terrible word, inexpensive bottle, a bargain of nice red wine, and you can poach some natural stone fruits in it. That takes no time at all. It's delicious and ties the wine into your buffet. So these are tried and true recipes. I hope you enjoy them. So those are over here. Okay. All right. So I also wanted to mention quickly, not that, I think most people know about the healthful benefits of chocolate, but just quickly to tell you that chocolate, dark chocolate, like we were saying, 70% and up, is super healthful, like we were saying. And if you have 1.5 ounce square each day, it's a very good thing to add to your diet. Very healthful, and it's supposed to actually help with your brain and your reasoning capacity. Uh-oh. Excuse me. And it helps, I hope I don't get a tickle, with Alzheimer's as well. So, okay. Excuse me. Harvard just came out with a study about that. I hope I don't choke. Oh, I've had a tickle for a long time, excuse me. Okay, so I want to read this last thing to you. I hope I get through it. And then we'll come over and we'll have our spritzer, and help yourself to the other chocolates. Do you have any other questions for me? No? Okay. Excuse me.
Sell your chocolates?
I do. I'm in the middle of developing an Etsy site. So you can contact me and I'll let you know when it's up. Yeah, I've had a lot of questions about the bark and things, so, yep. Oh, I hope I get through this, folks. I really do. I've had this tickle for like 2 weeks. Oh, okay, here it goes. This is my last thing. This is my poem. It's called The Ode to the Imperfect Table. Here's a toast to my imperfect holiday table. For perfection is a most exhausting fable. Years of executing Martha's holiday battle plans turned me into a deserter. Finally, I threw up my hands. So now I'm for sure older and wiser, embracing a kindler, gentler soiree, one with mismatched plates and controlled disarray. Yet the essential ingredient of laughter is still present, and the oh-so hale and hearty laughter warming our soul. Now that's a party. Around the table is my chosen tribe. With those I share a most grateful vibe. Per the wise poet Dali, he says, fate chooses our family, and we choose our friends. Choose wisely, grasshopper, upon this happiness depends. Who else but with your tribe do you break baguettes with and then happily imbibe? And so, as I sip my wine most reverently, I survey my room and smile gratefully. Gathering together with true friends, good energy abounds. Be thankful each day, for all of our blessings are all around. Thank you for coming. Okay, come on over when you're ready, and we'll sample some of this pomegranate spritzer. 1, 2, and where's the other one? 1, 2. Uh-oh. I think I mixed it. Oh, over here. Oh, okay, there.